Hi everyone, my name is Eve. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome. So today we are starting yet another mini series of videos, and this is an idea that I've been very excited about. So it would be a thriller slash horror slash suspense book recommendation for every Taylor Swift song per album. And I know you're probably thinking, how is that even gonna work? Because she writes love songs, and how are you meant to correlate that with thriller or horror books, right? Well, I'm a masochist, apparently, who wants to give her brain a run for its money. But, But it's an idea that would reflect me and what I like the most, and I didn't want to feel like I'm just recycling stuff that other people have done, and I thought it would just be a fun challenge. And some of these picks probably are gonna make people think, how is that even similar? But it is a bit of a hard task, and I thought that it's not exactly recycling the story of the song, because again, that is really difficult, but matching a vibe or how a character acts, or if there is some romance in the book, then matching that couple's dynamic. It's just, I tried not to think too much into it. Some songs really forced me into it, but say that riddles are good for the brain. So obviously I'm not doing her whole discography in one video. We'd be here for 10 hours. I decided to do it per album based on my, I wouldn't say least favorite, based on my very much loved one, but then going up to an even more loved one until we reach my absolute magnum opus God tier one. I'm not gonna do her debut and her Fearless album purely because I don't really listen to them anymore apart from a couple songs. I just feel like they were amazing to me when I was like 13, 14, but now I just feel that I can't really relate to a lot of them in a way that I could back then. And I just wouldn't feel right trying to pick books for those songs when I'm not actively listening to them as much. So we will start from Speak Now, going to the newest one, Midnights. And at the moment, my most loved one, but technically at the bottom is, and cue booing sounds because most of you will probably eat me alive, is 1989. I know. Like I said, I love it, but when it first came out, and even looking back now that she has all these albums, it has always been one that I related to the least. And I thought that while the songs that I liked were really, really, really good, there were also quite a few skips for me that I still don't really listen to. And we're all entitled to our own opinion. I don't know, maybe the Taylor's version with the vault tracks is going to change my mind. We'll find that out. It's all up in the air. I'm still really looking forward to it, but I thought I'm really excited to start this series, and I didn't want to wait another almost 2 months to make this video. So if my opinion changes after Taylor's version, we'll see. But anyway, let's get on. What I had made for myself when it comes to making these videos is that I had to have actually read the book that I'm recommending, and not just go, oh, I think it would fit based on the synopsis and what some people said, but then someone picks it up, the reason it's actually completely different. That is my only rule, and technically, I'm already breaking it in a way, but I just thought that this would actually be too perfect not to pick. And for the song Welcome to New York, which is, we're not off to a great start already, because that is one of the songs that I always skip. I just never vibed with it, although I love the look of New York City and I really want to go there. Just never clicked with me per se, but the book that I would pick for the song, I don't have it physical, and technically I've not read it, but I've seen the show, and I know that the first book and the first season of the show are pretty top-notch, on par, and that would be You by Caroline Kepnes. And I'll explain why. So in the show, and the whole universe and whatnot, it's basically confirmed that Joe Goldberg is a Swiftie, and I just think, obviously we've seen that some of the songs were used later on in the show. I just think that for people who haven't seen the last season, it might be a bit spoilery, but for when he circles back round to New York where the show started with his new missus, and we see him all again freshly shaven and stuff, I almost imagine that he played Welcome to New York to himself as he was flying back in there, just thinking nothing's gonna stop me. I'm making this a great new start. Sure, I killed a bunch of people, but nobody's perfect. Just justifying his actions. I'm not even going into too much description because I feel like at this point, pretty much everyone knows this book and this show, even if they've not seen it. Brilliant depiction of stalking. Like, the first season actually really creeped me out, and I feel like it had some amazing commentary. Again, how much of your life you're putting online, and how easy it would be for someone to actually stalk you and insert themselves into your life when you think about it, and how long it would take for you to catch on, if ever. That's the sort of stuff that can happen easily and does happen a lot of the time. So I would say that I will pick up the book at some point, but at the moment I feel like I have other ones that I want to get to first, and as I've already seen the show, and I know the first book and show season are really accurate. As far as I've seen, it's not in my priority list at this point. An interesting pick. Some of you will probably think, what on earth is she talking about? I will try to explain my thought process, but it is Say Her Name by Juno Dawson. And I think Juno Dawson is quite a versatile author. I've read Clean, which was a sort of a contemporary story about addiction, which I found really interesting, but that's not the point of this video. This book is a sort of a boarding school young adult horror story that is kind of its own take on the Bloody Mary urban legend. And the reason why I'm putting this book next to Blank Space is that obviously the song Blank Space is meant to create the image of Taylor that the media had at the time, and probably some general public still do, that she was this crazy psychotic serial dater who just looked for guys to inspiration for writing songs about. And this book, this whole time that they're trying to figure out how to stop Bloody Mary's ghost. Again, I'm trying to explain why I'm pairing these without spoiling the plot, which is more difficult than it looks, but essentially they're trying to stop what's happening in the book, thinking that she's just a misunderstood soul who needs to find peace and cross over and stuff. And again, without saying how the book ends, let's just say that it's not entirely as it seems, and this book has a very sort of straight to DVD horror movie ending type of thing, and I think people who watch that sort of stuff, they'll know what I mean, is in the sense that evil is hard to get rid of, and it's sort of subversion of what she was trying to say in the song, that she was making fun of that image. In this book, they thought the image is it's not the truth. Except, what if sometimes it is the truth, sort of thing. I hope I'm making sense, but that's why I picked this book. And in my mind, it makes sense. Style, which is one of my personal favorites. I mean, it's a genius song. I can see why it's so well beloved by the fans. I picked One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. I feel like most people who read thrillers know what this is about, but in case you don't, this is 5 teenagers end up in detention, and one of them dies during said detention, and the police think that it had to be one of them, and cue the title, One of Us is Lying. There's a lot more in this book than just figuring out what the hell happened and who's responsible for this guy's death. The reason I paired this book and the song is actually the relationship between two of the teenagers involved in this story. The good girl, Brownwyn, I hope that's right, and Nate, who are the classic good girl, bad boy cliche, and throughout the book, there's some budding romance there. They connect, except that she doesn't know if she can trust him for sure, because what if he had something to do with the guy's death? And also the fact that he is from a bad family background and no future prospects, the usual stuff, basically, when you think about it. I think actually this is probably the strongest romance that Karen M. McManus has done in her books. I'll talk about it more, but she has pretty much some kind of a romance in every one of her stories. We'll get to that in this video actually as well a bit. But that this book captures the feeling of style pretty well, because as much as they get torn apart by some doubts and some life circumstances, they're always drawn back to each other. And I feel like that song also encapsulates that feeling. Whether or not it's completely healthy for you, it's debatable, but it just clicked with me when I thought, like, what do I pick for the song? For Out of the Woods, we have Torn by Kat Clark. The text looks weird because this is a Lithuanian copy. It's actually one of the very first thrillers, YA or otherwise, that I've ever read. And this is about, it's kind of, I Know What You Did Last Summer, but then without the hook-handed killer. A group of girls who end up accidentally causing the death of their classmate on a school trip, and they end up putting her body down the well. Actually, the reason I'm pairing these two, the book and the song, is that about the song Out of the Woods, even Taylor herself has said that she wrote the chorus to encapsulate the feeling of anxiety, like, are we out of these woods, when is this gonna end, sort of thing. And obviously she meant more of an anxiety about a relationship, but this is it's not so much of a thriller like what is happening, like who did this to this person, sort of thing, because we find out relatively early on in the book exactly what happened. It's more the case of the main character's guilt is quite literally eating her alive. Like, she's actually seeing the girl that they accidentally killed, and she really wants to make things right and confess, and she actually ends up getting involved with the dead girl's brother. It's because they were friends, like, way once upon a time, which probably adds to the guilt. And it's the main question of this book is, what is gonna happen? Is she gonna confess? Is she gonna make things right, basically? And what are gonna be the consequences for that? So I would say that the feeling of the book and the song, they are kind of similar, even if the storylines are completely different, and that's why I picked them. He adapted to a juvenile dynamic between teenagers if you tried, so yeah, I just thought if it fits, I'm not gonna fight against it. So sorry if you think, oh, why is this author appearing again? But this book is about a cold case that the main character has to find out more about as she moves back to the town that she used to live when the murder happened, because the guy who was found dead was one of her favorite teachers. And the reason that I paired these is that one of the guys who found the body, he was actually a really close friend of the main character, Bryn, and Trip. That could rhyme. But, so yeah, the two main characters whose point of view the story's from, so they used to be really close until Trip basically just told her to go away and that she's being a creep in front of, like, not the whole school, but, like, I think their whole class. I mean, to a preteen, it's probably one of the most embarrassing things that they can think of, to be just told off in front of their peers. Like, you would want the ground to probably just swallow you whole. It seems like the end of the world. And they just never speak again. And until, obviously, the action starts happening. And even then, it takes them a while to sort of find their way back to each other. And it just reminded me a bit of the song in a sense that Bryn did nothing wrong, and Trip just basically told her to get away from him for no apparent reason, and it literally just seemed that he just threw their relationship into the ground. And it might not be the most exact match, but it was the closest that I could think of out of the books I had read at this point. So, yeah, that's why I picked it. Shake It Off, it was actually really, really hard to think of something. So, this is a stretch and a half. And it's going to be really hard to explain why without spoiling stuff. I will try. So, it's basically go to celebrate New Year's with, like, all their family, friends, and extended relatives in this house until they essentially find a dead body in the garden that's been there for decades, and they start sort of investigating the history of this estate. And we're meant to think that it's going to be something supernatural. Again, I'm not going to spoil it, but I'm just going to say that it's not always what it looks like. It's a really short read. How thick is it? It's literally just like 250 pages, something like that. But the reason I paired these, apart from that I was running out of ideas, was the person who is responsible for things that happen, because them finding that decade-old body remains wasn't the end of it. So stuff that happens, and the person who causes stuff to happen, they easily could have that attitude of shake it off in their mind, justifying stuff that they pulled, that, well, I'm right and they're just haters. And that's very, very stretchy justification for some crap that goes down in this book. But yeah, I thought, you know what, I'm not gonna overthink it. I'll slap this on. It works, maybe just barely, but it does. But that song, like, it has nothing story-wise to just cling on to, so it was really hard. But again, thankfully, the last mention of Karen M. McManus, You'll Be the Death of Me, and this one is actually, if I had to rank her books, which I'm going to do for the future video, this is my least favorite of hers so far, but it was still good, hence why I'm including it in the video. It was still a good book. It's just I don't know what I expected exactly, but it's described Ferris Bueller's Day Off with murder. And I'm not sure how accurate that would be, but it's about these 3 former friends who have fell out for whatever reason. They all end up ditching school together and they run into each other, and then they discover a body of their dead classmate. And then things just sort of go off the rocker, if I'm honest. I remember reading it thinking, okay, that's a bit insane. We'll get to that another time. But the reason I paired these is, again, I find, especially in her more recent works, that Karen M. McManus has a tendency to rip these characters apart in their dynamic and then basically say that the reason why this happened was because they had feelings for each other the whole time but couldn't really communicate it. And two of the main characters, who are Ivy and Mateo, yes, and there's Cal, but yeah, so basically they sort of had this budding romance beforehand, and because of some miscommunications they fell out again. That's why they haven't spoken in years, and there's sort of regret when it comes to that. So again, it is a bit of a stretch, but I thought that the song matches that feeling as closely as possible. Don't we all wish sometimes that someone we fell out with would just show up and say, I'm so sorry, I regret everything? I thought the feeling that pair in the book encapsulated was as close. Sure why it's so disliked among the fandom, because I love that song. We have TM Logan, The Holiday. And I feel like this one is more obvious than some of the last picks I've had. It's about three families who have all been old friends, and they go on holiday together. At least they try to go like every year. And we are meant to think from the very get-go that one of the main character's friends is cheating on their own husband and cheating with the main character's husband. What's the main character's name? Kate. But yeah, she finds some messages and spends most of the book thinking, which one is it? And of course, when you find something like that out and you don't even know who the culprit is, and you spend a week staring at these friends who have been there for you through thick and thin and think one of you is shagging my husband and lying to my face about it, you will definitely think that we now got some bad blood. I know I would have handled the situation with a lot less class if I was in that situation. The book itself is a whole other matter when it comes to some pacing issues. I thought it could have been cut down a bit. I tend to say that a lot. I don't know, maybe I just need to get used to a bit of slower books. Anyway, that's not the video for that, but yeah, I think when it comes to the feeling that the song encompasses and this book, I think it's probably one of the closer matches I managed to find, but yeah. For Wildest Dreams, we have The Black Eyes, or was it Black Eyes? I'm not sure if it has that in the title, but Black Eyes by Becca Fitzgerald. Again, this is a Lithuanian copy. Again, one of the first thrillers I've ever read, and I remember back on reading it. It's so YA, and it's very, very juvenile, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't entertaining at the time. And this is basically about two friends who go on this ski holiday, and they run into these guys who have broken into the cabin, and essentially they take them hostage. Pairing these, because it seems super random. I bet you're listening thinking, okay, how does this make any logical sense? It's because it's not a Stockholm Syndrome situation, but it turns out that one of these guys, he is a bit pressured into doing this, and he is the one who is pretty much left alone with the main character, and she starts catching feelings, which is a very weird time to catch said feelings, if I may say, but I mean, who am I to talk about it? Life and death situations can bring out interesting things in people, but yeah, something about their dynamic when like remembering about it from the book just struck me as similar to ones in the song. And in the sense that in the song, they knew that their relationship, it had no good ending. And she literally talks about him leaving her and remembering her. And in this book, when you think about it, what sort of a relationship could they have had, depending on the ending, even if they make it out alive, even from their situation? He essentially still kidnapped her. Like, how would they make it work? It's not something you can easily get past. It's very complex stuff. So that was my correlation between the two, if that makes sense. It does to me, but I don't know. I hope it does make sense to everyone. When it comes to this album, and finding a song for it was quite difficult because it is like very cutesy, chick flicky type of song. And the book that I picked is not a book I particularly liked much. But it is There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. Sorry, it was so many books, I'm starting to get a bit mixed up with the names. And the reason I'm picking this one is because, as a lot of people have said, this is actually a romance disguised as a bit of a thriller. And I have to agree. That's why it was just for me, because I think it was marketed wrong. Because it started out as this an unknown person is breaking into people's houses and killing them, and you think this is almost like a slashery type of thriller, maybe a bit of a horror sort of, trickled in, but it's not that really. It's pretty much almost like a bit of a romance drama until stuff happens in the very last like fifth of the book, which I'm not gonna spoil, but then once it happens you're like, what? So yeah, creative choices were made. By the way, I have watched the movie. The book's based on Men's. The movie has nothing. Just don't bother with it. I kept thinking the whole time, this is the book they chose to adapt, and they did this type of job with it. Thanks a lot, Netflix. Thanks a lot for that. I'm sorry, but no. Anyway, the reason I picked this one is because there's this couple who the main character meets this guy. What's the main character's name? Makani. So yeah, she meets this guy, Ollie, and they start sort of hooking up as teenagers do, and then he completely messes it up, and they just go full on teenage melodrama about it. But then he sorts his crap out essentially, and they get together again throughout the book. And at first I thought, this feels a bit like Cruel Summer, and then I thought, you know what, Cruel Summer is one of my favorite songs, and as bad as that sounds, I'm not gonna waste that song on a book that I wasn't too fond of. So I would still say try this book. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I don't include books that are absolutely completely despised in recommendations. I just think that it should have been marketed as a romantic YA mystery. I think if it was marketed as that, I would have known what to expect. Like I said, there's nothing worse to me when reading than expecting one thing, because that's how it was presented and turning out was something completely different. But as far as the song goes, and the relationship, I think that matches, because he acted like a jerk and he lost Makani, and then he sorted stuff out and he had her again. So it makes sense. Now, I did say that I wouldn't recommend the books that I didn't like on this list. However, the one exception I'm gonna make is because it is just completely perfect with the song's imagery. I really couldn't think of another book for the song at this time, and I didn't want to spend ages waiting around to see if I'll find the right book to recommend for, or maybe not even find the book at all. Besides, a lot of people love it, so maybe I'm just the odd one out. I don't know. But this is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, and again, Lithuanian copy. Actually, I prefer this cover to the English one, so win for me, I guess. But I feel like everyone knows what this book is about already, but if you don't, quickly, it's this rich girl. She is really heavily medicated because something happened the summer before that everyone's shielding her from, and she just wants to get back to the island that her family owns, that she goes to every month, and just meet her cousins and just figure out what the hell happened last summer. And there are twists in this, I'll give it that. I think I was actually surprised, and the reason why I'm including this is because for people who know the twist, again, I'm trying really hard not to spoil. It's basically the imagery in the song of the tides bringing someone in and the tides bringing someone out again. It really matches the whole thing that she gets these people back and then them again, is she not? And obviously the fact that it's set around the ocean in an island, it's really, yeah, it's that feeling of loneliness in the song. And throughout this whole book, even as she's surrounded by people, she feels completely alone. So I was thinking this is as close as I'm going to get to finding a match for the song at this time. And like I said, I was really excited to get the series going, so I thought I'll just do it. And I hope that the reason why I picked this one makes sense. But yeah, I mean, like I said, is there something wrong with me that I wasn't massive on this book? I don't know, but I thought I'll still include it for reasons I've already said. Clean. We have a bit of an interesting choice, which I hope will make some logical sense. It's In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. Already, you probably must be thinking, wouldn't it have made sense to use it for Out of the Woods? And I thought about it, but then I was like, you know what? No. So this one, a Hindu gone massively wrong. The main character, Nora, receives an invitation to a Hindu from someone that she's not spoken to in 10 years. So immediately she's thinking, because it is a bit strange. Another friend of hers who she has kept in touch with has been invited, so they make this pact, like, we'll go together, check this out. If something's not clicking, we'll just dip. It's in this really sort of secluded glass house almost in the middle of the woods somewhere in North England. And when they go, she finds out that her former friend, who she hasn't spoken to in a decade, is marrying none other but her ex, who she broke up with really dramatically, and it was a traumatic experience. It's revealed really early in the book, so I'm not feeling like I'm spoiling anything, but essentially, he knocked her up and basically told her to take care of it. And she was so traumatized by it that, I mean, I can't even imagine. It must be terrible, especially going through something like that so young, and with no support from the guy who very much should be involved in the situation, because no, he was there. Picked this book for the song is because the song talks about that feeling of finally letting go of a relationship that wasn't good for you and feeling clean and free, like, your mind's no longer imprisoning you in that sort of bad state. And when we meet Nora in the book, even though it's been a decade, she's not over it at all. She still thinks about this guy. That was actually my one qualm in the book. That, she's not what they would call a strong woman. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but it was actually a bit sad to watch her still be so hung up on this guy who was such a douche to her. And then again, we find out not everything as it seems. There's a lot more layers to it, but considering she's not had a serious relationship and she couldn't even, like, be with someone physically without breaking down in tears, and she's not there yet. And for all that happens in this book, I know that wasn't exactly the plot point, probably not something that Ruth Ware gave like super deep thought into, because it is primarily an entertainment thriller, but I do think that there was this subtle journey throughout the book of her actually letting that go and feeling like she can move on from the situation and heal and live the rest of her life and to finally have closure on it. And that's why I picked this book for this song. I thought that it was, I mean, maybe I might be reading too much into it, but for me, I thought that it was a journey, and it's like, what happened in this book, it's a real shame that it had to happen. I'd rather it have not. Obviously, there would be no book if it didn't, but you know what I mean. But if it had to happen for her to actually shake up and process her trauma, then that's what happened. Next now, this one, I wouldn't say it's a cheat, but I did want one easy pick. So for Wonderland, I picked Insanity by Cameron James, which is, it is fantasy, but primarily it is a horror retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where Alice is in a mental institution by night while pretending to be a college student by day and trying to solve a mystery of a serial killer. And I know that this series is absolutely massive. I have the second book, but I'm not sure that I'm gonna keep on reading them because, like I said in a previous video or a future video, I'm not sure which order I'm gonna upload these in. I will see, but that much of a series girly. I would rather read standalones, but I was really intrigued, and I think that, I mean, do I even need to explain the link? It's probably the most on the nose one on this list. Insanity, Alice in Wonderland retelling versus Song of Wonderland. It makes perfect sense, but there's also a bit of romance here, a bit of this and that, and it is a really good book. Like, if you're into fairy tale retellings with a bit of a horror twist, definitely check this one out. Whether or not you want to read a whole of 9-10 books in the series, that's completely up to you. Like I said, I don't know if I'm gonna do it. We'll find out. You Are in Love. It's another song I don't listen to much. I don't know why, it just never clicked with me massively. I might change my mind. We'll find out. And this will seem like a weird pick, but it's Frozen Charlotte by Alex Bell. This is part of Red Eye series, the first one and for the most people the best one. It's about this girl Sophie who goes to visit her family after a tragic, untimely death of her best friend, and she finds these Frozen Charlotte dolls in the house, and as soon as she does, the weird things start happening. And there were some weird things before already, but it only gets way worse after she arrives. And the reason I'm picking this, because it seems completely out of the left field, I know, is because the relationship she develops with this guy, I mean, technically he is her cousin, but let's not get into that. The song You're in Love strikes me as like this really quiet and peaceful and sort of like protective, when you just find basically your soulmate, and it's not about some like really loud grand gesture moments. It's more about I'm so sorry if the lighting is all off, but there's like this massive storm cloud now, and of course the one day I decide to film, the clouds would come in, although I could use some rain. Anyway, basically it's like about the quiet moments that make up that relationship, and I mean, that's what it's about in real life, really. But again, another topic. So many topics to talk about, so little time. Anyway, this relationship between them in this book kind of reminded me of the song, because there were like no loud declarations, no statements of their bond, but it was just about them being there for each other and trying to understand each other and protecting each other. And at the end of the day, she had her doubts about him, but when things hit the fan, he was the one she thought of to lean on, and I thought that was really nice. And it's definitely a favorite book. Like, you've seen me talk about it if you've watched my previous videos, and it seems like a weird match, but it's the closest one I could think of at this time. that's amazing because my voice feels absolutely shot. And for New Romantics, which I actually got into the song only recently. I know it's a massive fan favorite, has been since the release, but again, it just didn't click with me as much until recently, and now I think it's a banger. So when Taylor's version comes out, I'm gonna be bopping to that. And for this one, I picked Suburban Hell by Maureen Kilmer. And I know, again, seems random. I will explain. So this book is about 30-something housewives in a suburban neighborhood who have these weekly wine nights together, and they decide to use one of their friends' shed and renovate it as like their little girl's corner, so to speak. And then that friend ends up getting possessed. It's like a horror comedy sort of thing. It has some gory moments, I would say. So if you're like super, super sensitive to gore and it's not something you look in your horror stuff, then be mindful. But it does steer. It goes more into the comedy side. Like I wouldn't say that it scared me. It grossed me out a couple times, like I said. But overall, the reason I'm pairing these two together is because New Romantics is about that youthful feeling of figuring life out and trying to find people to do it with. She wrote the album when she was 25. Well, she released it when she was 25, so she wrote it a bit earlier, but it's about being 25, and basically this reminded me of this book because it's about women who are looking for some solace in each other because for whatever reason they provide something to one another that their families can't, even if it's just like a night of no responsibility, just sipping some wine and having a bit of a gossip. I mean, that's completely normal to want that. And obviously, again, without spoiling, when stuff starts happening to their friend and she gets possessed, it's not her husband who notices or cares, it's her friends. And the lyric, the best people in life are free, it's her friends who care enough to figure out what the hell is going on and how do we stop this just spreading. And obviously it's not as easy as that, but yeah, I mean, well, does this book have a sequel? I think this book might have a sequel, so if it does, I will actually be inclined to pick it up because I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that it was my all-time favorite. I think in my tier ranking I put it like in the second row from the top, but I am quite picky with like what my absolute all-time favorites are. I keep saying, if all books are your favorites, then is any book really your all-time favorite? But anyway, I think that it fits the theme of that sometimes you really do need some people in your life to pull you back and give you a bit of intervention, and it doesn't always have to be a romantic connection. So yeah, that's why I picked this. The first video in the series done. I'm really looking forward to doing the rest of her albums that I will talk about. I won't really say what my next one is. You will find out when it's uploaded, so to keep a bit of a surprise factor. And technically it's like the next one up my ranking. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be uploaded because I'm still gathering books for it, but hopefully sooner rather than later. So I hope that you liked this video. Let me know what you think of my picks. If you think that they are completely ridiculous, then please let me know. I've tried my best and I just wanted to have some fun with it. You know, I didn't want to stress about it too much. This is meant to be for fun. So I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, please rate, comment, subscribe. I'm open to all discussions as long as they're civil, of course.